Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to this webinar organized by the Adaptation Fund. We will be starting in about 3 minutes just to give more people to join us, considering that you're joining from one session to another. So we will start in about 3 minutes. We'll just wait for another minute and then kick off the session. We're happy to see you all here.
Katerine, I think we can go ahead and start because a lot of people choose the streaming version so they don't connect to Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. Good morning again, good afternoon and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar titled Monitoring of Locally Led Adaptation Interventions, Challenges and Opportunities, organized by the Adaptation Fund. My name is Katerine Vrenesi, and I will be moderating the webinar today. Before we start, let me first remind you of a few important things. This webinar will be recorded, and we have people joining us here on Zoom and also in the Whova platform, which is the official Gobeshona platform. Please post your questions in the chat box, and we will make sure to address them at the end during the Q&A segment. The recording and presentations will be posted in Adaptation Fund website and will be shared through our social media channels. My colleagues, Christina Dengel and Martina Doriga, will be facilitating the chat and will be responding to your questions and posting relevant links there. We're delighted to host this webinar at the Gobeshona, recognizing the topic and the important role of locally led initiatives in climate risk reduction. This session will focus on the implementation of monitoring of locally led adaptation projects, and will present concrete examples from the Adaptation Fund's national implementing entities implementing such initiatives from their country perspectives. Also, we have a colleague from the Adaptation Secretariat who will present funding mechanisms available for locally led adaptation initiatives, including how to access such funding window, etc. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Mikko Ollikainen, who is the head of the Adaptation Fund, for the opening remarks and give you some context on the topic that we're going to discuss today, and in general about the work of the Adaptation Fund. Mikko, if you're ready, over to you.
Thank you very much, Katerine, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, participants from me as well. I'd like to recognize how grateful we are to be able to organize this session in Gobeshona conference, again, also commemorating the legacy of our good friend and colleague, Professor Salim Hook, who was one of the main driving force of this important conference until his untimely passing 4 months ago. But his important legacy will live on in the form of how we adapt to climate change, including through this conference. So it's my pleasure as well to welcome you all to this Adaptation Fund session on challenges and opportunities in monitoring of locally led adaptation initiatives. I'm positive this session will be a good opportunity to share valuable knowledge with the global adaptation community to inform the design and implementation of local activities and decision-making in adaptation projects and programs. As you may know, the Adaptation Fund is the only fund that's fully dedicated to financing adaptation action. Since becoming operational in 2010, The fund has supported nearly 165 concrete projects covering over 112 countries with more than $1 billion committed to date. The Adaptation Fund acts on the premise that adaptation must be local, as local actors, including local governments, civil society, and communities, have the best understanding of their local circumstances and their needs. The Adaptation Fund has been a long-time supporter of locally led action for adaptation and has been committed to devolving adaptation finance to local levels through pioneering direct access and enhanced direct access modalities, embedding the mandate of our locally led action in our medium-term strategy that is guiding our work in a cross-cutting theme, in addition to innovative approaches to providing support in a flexible way. Our very first enhanced direct access project carried out by Zambi in South Africa nearly a decade ago showed successes and provided valuable knowledge in empowering local actors to climate-proof infrastructure and vulnerable farmers to take steps to improve their lives, while enhancing ecosystems and offering sustainable and resilient solutions to drought and other climate challenges. And we've come quite a long way since then, and I'm really happy to see colleagues from other national implementing entities joining us here today and sharing their experiences. We've developed an explicit enhanced direct access funding window now that is available for NIEs in addition to our regular country funding, and other funding windows that are fostering locally led adaptation in addition to our regular project, which are inherently local as well. Excuse me. The lessons learned from our diverse portfolio are quite clear. Enabling local actors to undertake adaptation is really key to achieving resilience from local to global levels. And it's therefore crucial that adaptation projects are informed by that local knowledge to shape the project activities so as to meet their needs and to avoid risks that might otherwise result from not understanding the local context. Putting the local actors in the decision-making role also empowers them in building their own resilience, which is crucial for climate justice and for enhancing the sustainability of project outcomes after the project's end. The environmental and social policy and the gender policy of the Adaptation Fund also play a key role in guiding local inclusion in project formulation and throughout the project cycle by reinforcing existing requirements on meaningful consultation, for example, with all the intended stakeholders of the project. As part of our work on knowledge management, and my colleague Carl Trin here represents our knowledge management team, and through collaboration with the Global Commission on Adaptation, the Adaptation Fund produced a study titled Local Leadership in Adaptation Finance that showcases common successful threads in several of the fund's projects that highlight the importance of locally led action in adaptation and in building resilience to climate change among vulnerable communities. We've integrated this learning when we developed our medium-term strategy for 2023-2027 and the strategy's implementation plan. And with the adoption of those strategy and plan last year, we are now committed to further expanding access to locally led adaptation, including the opening of new dedicated funding windows. We've undertaken consultations recently during COP28 in Dubai to see how we can best design our next offering in this space. And we are currently proposing new funding modalities to the Adaptation Fund Board, which will have its meeting in April. So these modalities are expected to include options for enabling local actors and organizations that are not accredited or cannot be accredited with the Adaptation Fund so that they can access finance through us. So through this session, we are pleased to share the insights on how efficient monitoring of local projects and enhanced direct access projects and programs are aiming to support successful locally led adaptation measures and strategies. I'd like to wish you a very good session and encourage you to participate in it actively. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mikko. Thanks. Indeed, the Adaptation Fund puts strong emphasis on promoting locally based and locally led adaptation in its projects and programs. And what just Mikko said, it's a good segue for our next presentation, who will be delivered by our AF Secretariat colleague, Justice Musa, and he will provide a more comprehensive information on the LLA funding window and Adaptation Fund's results framework. Justice, over to you if you're ready. And I see that your presentation is up. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thanks to Mikko for opening the session. Also, stand on existing protocol. I'm excited to be here to participate in this very important conference, which is discussing one of the most important topics in our effort to address climate change risk. My presentation basically will follow what Mikko has already presented in his opening remarks. 1 minute, good. So my presentation basically has 3 parts. First, I will briefly introduce the Adaptation Fund, which I'm very sure most of our participants are aware of the Adaptation Fund and have the understanding of the work that we do. Then the second part will focus on local-led adaptation. Then the last part will focus on the Adaptation Fund Strategic Resource Framework and how that is designed as an instrument for monitoring projects. So basically, as you know, the Adaptation Fund was set up some 15 years ago under the Kyoto. It became operational around 2010, under the Kyoto Protocol. Basically, as Mikko already said, the mandate is to finance concrete adaptation projects and programs in developing country parties that are particularly vulnerable to climate change. And indeed, local communities are the first port of call. So that is why this discussion is quite important. Around 2019, it became an institute that is serving under the Paris Agreement, under the CMA. As you know, the Adaptation Fund is one of the several international funds within the multilateral climate change finance landscape. And Mikko has already touched on the strategic, the medium-term strategy that is developed from 2023 to 2027. It's anchored on 3 main pillars. It has the action pillar, the learning and sharing pillar, it has the innovation pillar, and 6 cross-cutting thematic areas. And one of the 6 cross-cutting thematic areas is promoting local-based adaptation action, which we'll be discussing today. Briefly, what are the various funding windows that exist within the Adaptation Fund? There are 4 key funding windows, which basically anchored in the action, innovation, learning and sharing grants, and readiness. Under the action window, there are 4 types. So you can access the Adaptation Fund through a single country project or through a regional project or enhanced direct access or a project scale up. Since the slides will be shared, you will be able to have the detail in terms of how to be able to access each of these projects and the amount of resources that you can access under each of these funding types. Under the innovation, there are also 3 types of innovation funding that you should be able to access: the single country small grant, the large single country or regional grant, and then the Adaptation Fund Innovation Accelerator. Then under the learn and sharing, there is a grant that you should be able to access to support the generation and dissemination of practical knowledge about effective adaptation activities and financing modalities to actors around the world. Then under the readiness, there are 3 main types of readiness that you should be able to access. One is to support accreditation. And the second is to also support, developing environmental and social safeguards and gender-related policies. So these are the various funding windows that exist at the Adaptation Fund. The Adaptation Fund basically supports projects across all sectors, from disaster risk reduction, nature-based solution to coastal And almost all these thematic areas are also in sync with the 7 thematic areas that was adopted at the last COP as part of the global goal of adaptation. So I will look at the second component of the presentation, which is on the new funding window that basically focuses on locally led adaptation, which Miko has already touched on. It's something that is being developed and it will be presented at the next board meeting in April for the board's consideration. But before we go into that, let's look at these 3 questions. The first question is, do you know that less than 10% of global finance flow to local communities directly? Meanwhile, local communities are those that really bear the brunt of climate change impact. But less than 10% of funding really reach them, restricting beneficiaries to really participate in the decision-making process as to how climate change funds are spent. Then do you also know that for every 17 project that is approved, only 1 is more or less an LLA? And this was an extensive research conducted by WRI in 2021. Then the last thing I want you to reflect on is, why is the local level the epicenter of vulnerability and high risk, yet finance for LLA continue to be very low? So it is on this basis that the Adaptation Fund is leading and already have an existing modalities of financing, LLA, and also creating a new financing window. So in previous discussion, these are some of the responses that we have gotten from the climate change community as to why climate change finance flow to local communities continue to remain low. So there's lack of understanding of climate change impacts at the local level. There's lack of understanding and knowledge of adaptation measures. And most importantly, there's low capacity to write or otherwise prepare adaptation proposal. And there is also absence of funding opportunities to apply for. So the new funding window that is basically to be created respond to almost all these responses that were provided in different climate change discussion that we've had. And if we had asked you to put your responses to those questions in the chat, basically some of these responses that you were going to provide. So the new funding window, basically it is anchored in the second strategic, medium-term strategic framework of the fund. And what does it say? It says that it will enhance support for locally based and locally led adaptation. So how are we going to do that? Through consolidating and refining existing LLA focused modalities. So Miko has already mentioned this. We already have some modalities that support locally based adaptation activities. And that is why some of our implementing entities will be presenting funds that they have assessed and implementing existing projects. Then the second leg will be establishing a global aggregator mechanism for LLA. And basically this will support non-accredited entities to be able to access funding to implement projects at the local level. So in terms of designing this locally led adaptation new funding window, it is anchored on the principle of LLA. So the attempt is to be able to devolve decision-making to local level and to address structural inequalities in terms of access to finance, in terms of women, in terms of vulnerable group, local communities, indigenous people, and also provide patient and predictable funding. If we create a funding window, basically that means that there is that kind of predictable funding that institution will be able to access to implement projects at the local level. So in terms of designing, consultations were done, and also these principles that the Adaptation Fund has already adopted has informed the process of designing this particular funding. And some of the issues that came up, during the consultation process in designing this fund basically are what you see on the screen. So one of the key things that came up is adaptation rationale is quite challenging. So it would be good if the process allows climate change rationale to be defined during project implementation. And it's something that is quite critical. And if within the climate change discussion, it's something that everybody acknowledges really difficult. If you look at some countries that do not have data up to 30 years, it's quite difficult to really, develop the climate rationale to underpin, projects. Then the role of vulnerable groups like youth, women. So all these issues were taken on board in terms of designing the new, funding window. So the last part of my presentation will focus on designing and monitoring and evaluation for locally led adaptation. And I will be discussing the Adaptation Fund Strategic Resource Framework. And basically that serves as an instrument for monitoring climate change projects, which include LLA. Why monitor? Basically, monitoring is critical for understanding the effectiveness of a program. Life without monitoring is not life living. So if you have a project that you are implementing, it is important for you to have a system in place to be able to monitor such projects or programs, because not all the variables that are likely to impact the project's outcome will be detected during the project development. So it is important that you monitor the implementation process to be able to understand new things that are coming up and put systems in place to be able to address them, head on. So regular assessment allows you to identify success and areas for improvement. And it also ensures accountability, because when you design a project, there is a resource, component of the project, and you need to be able to report to ensure that the outcomes or how the project is being implemented is in line with the resource framework that was agreed during the project approval. So basically, the common reasons why we do monitoring have been divided into three. One, compliance to institutional policy. So at the Adaptation Fund level, there are certain, modalities, institutions, and practices that you need to be able to comply with. So we have the project level resource. Basically, you need to report on your project level resource, how these projects are being implemented, how is it in sync with the resource that was, agreed in the proposal. Then we also have an evaluation policy. Then we have the environmental and social policies. We need to make sure that the project that is being implemented is not creating more environmental harmful effect. And also gender-related issues related to youth are well, taken care of in the implementation process. Then issues related to procurement in terms of national laws, procurement to make sure that there is no collusion in terms of the people that we procure their services. Then lastly, compliance to global development paradigms and principles like the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, gender, indigenous people. So these are the basic principles that guide, monitoring and evaluation. So the strategic resource framework at Adaptation Fund, we have 5 main core indicators, but this has been revised and it will be presented at the next board meeting. And the hope is that once the revised version is adopted, we will have more than the 5 core indicators that you see. So basically, there are 2 impact level resources. The projects that you are implementing at the local level must increase adaptive capacity of communities to respond to the impact of climate change. And it must also increase the resilience of ecosystem. So under each of these 2 key impact resource areas, there are core indicators that will be used to, measure what are the number of beneficiaries that has been impacted, either directly or indirectly, the number of early warning systems that has been developed, assets produced or developed or strengthened, increased income or avoided. So these are the core indicators that we use in terms of reporting on projects that are implemented at the local level. And these are the general outcome and output metrics that implementing entities report back to the fund for us to be able to follow to see whether the project is being implemented as agreed in the funding proposal. So basically, if you look at our strategic resource framework, resource indicator 2, 3, and 5 are more related to LLA, but I did not bring the entire framework, so I chose only indicator 1 and indicator 2 to present as an example. So we will look at issues related to reduce exposure to climate change. So we'll look at the number of threats or hazard that has been reduced. We'll look at the risk and vulnerability assessment that has been conducted or updated. So at the local level, what are the various risk and vulnerability assessment that has been conducted? Or if we had an existing one, has this been updated? Then the second example is what you see on the screen, what are the institutions that their capacity has been built. We count the number of these institutions as we report. Then we look at the number of staff that has been trained. We disaggregate this by gender to understand that we are not only training some group of people, but we are having quite a comprehensive approach in terms of the project that we are implementing on the ground. So basically, this is the framework we use in terms of monitoring the implementation of our project on the ground. So I'll end here and thank you very much for your participation. And when you have any question, please put in the chat. Myself and my colleagues are here to respond. And once the other colleagues have also done with their presentation, we will be able to respond to some of the concerns that you have. Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you, Justice, for this very thorough presentation on Adaptation Fund's LLA window, new LLA window, and the monitoring and results framework. I'm sure I see that people are joining in as we are moving on. So welcome to people that just joined now. As we move forward, I know that you have many questions for Justice, and if you want to know more about the Adaptation Fund, please visit our website, and my colleagues will post the links there so you can read more about our funding windows and everything that Justice just presented. And as I said, please post your questions in the chat box, and we will make sure to address them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Up next, we move to another segment, which is the presentations from our national implementing entities. And actually, you could hear more from them on practical examples on implementing locally led initiatives and from their country perspectives. To start with, we have Marianela Feoli from Costa Rica. Marianela, if you're ready, could you please briefly introduce yourself and start sharing your presentation? Marianela.
Hi, Catherine, and thank you very much, and hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure actually to follow after Miko and Justice on this focus on locally led adaptation. I'm Marianela Feoli from Fondo de Cooperación para el Desarrollo Sostenible in Costa Rica. It's an NGO that we've been accredited with the Adaptation Fund since 2012, now reaccredited, of course. And we've been implementing since our beginning on the focus on locally led adaptation. So we're a firm believer of that is the way to go. As Miko said, the adaptation is local, and it needs to be locally led. So I'm very glad to share on what we're doing and more on what we're doing on the challenges that implies, because as we say that there are so many benefits on implementing locally led adaptation, there's also challenges and actions to be taken. You're looking at the screen, right? Okay.
Yes, Marianela, we can see your presentation. You could maybe just, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So we are at the moment now in implementing a program on scaling up Adaptados, which is the scaling up part, the phase of a program that was very focused in locally led adaptation. And this scaling up has started in September 2023, and it's going to be going for 5 years, and it's 10 million US dollars for the budget, and it's focused in scaling up Adaptados program into focusing reducing vulnerability, and especially focusing in food systems. So we're more watching at the value chain and the food system itself, just in specific parts. It has a very specific way of implementing, and perhaps I wanted to show you this, that it's even though we're the national implementing entity, we work very closely with very specific strategic partners. but also operational partners and allies. And we have more than, I don't know, I think it's like 20 different executing entities. In the Adaptados program, the first phase, there was about 40 different executing entities. We have reduced now to 20, but that still implies working with a lot of specific local NGOs, working at the level of the communities or organizations of this from a sector, a specific chamber or specific either private or public institution or NGO working very directly into the communities. So that has given us the opportunity to reach into a wider level of impact at the communities. A lot of actions into changing into generating adaptation capacity and adaptation changes. And for instance, this is an example of an intervention more focused into the agro sector, and where there was specific activities and practices implemented at the farm level, involving in bioinput, seeds management, soil conservation, animal feed, and a few of these, as you see on the screen, drop irrigation, water management in farms, but all of them as an integrated way of improving the farms. And in many of these were involved like different, like around 12 different executing entities joining in the same focus, but in different communities, in different farms, in different levels and different sectors, but giving us the opportunity to make it in a concealed way. So the focus is, it's a common focus, it's a common base, of course, in the specific challenges from the different areas. Some areas imply drier seasons, some areas a lot of rain, so the actions, the adaptation actions are different, but still the focus is common. And all of them made necessary to have a strong efforts in capacity building, access to finance, in watching also into the value chain, and also looking always for innovation opportunities. So with that, we had a lot of work in communities we're having a lot of work in communities and in implementing technologies, water management, and working also at the coastal levels and everything. Also, we have working in that through the locally led adaptation, working with specific local NGOs. It has given us the opportunity also to reach indigenous communities in different areas of Costa Rica, and also promote the collaboration among some of those indigenous communities. And those implied rescue of ancestral practices, bioinputs, diversified food crops, and other activities like this. And all of that had a strong involvement of women, youth, but a lot of different communities and a lot of different also local or root-based organizations. So what are the challenges of managing and monitoring a program with such a strong focus in locally led? And I put these 8 points that I want to perhaps highlight on some of the challenges and actions that we've taken, that are because we definitely are, as I mentioned, a true believer of the 8 principles of the locally led adaptation, and definitely all of the benefits that imply, but then you have to take into account that locally led adaptation or working with multiple executing entities that require farther, wider, and continuous coordination and communication efforts. So you have so it's not just between you as an NIE with the executing entity, but it's also promoting the communication among executing entities, making sure that there is a collaboration among them, a cross-learning among them, and it's it's also some of them imply a lot, and then that's moving into point Two, it's capacity strengthening, capacity building efforts for local entities along the project cycle in areas at the beginning of the project and for instance on the environmental and social and gender policy and our safeguards, but also into strengthening their financial and administrative monitoring themselves and capacities. And so at different levels, there's a lot of efforts, and the NIE does need to have a lot of efforts and resources dedicated into making sure that we facilitate that capacity building and that capacity strengthening. And that's 1 and 2. Number 3, it's there's a strong challenge in aggregate and consolidate all of the information. Because, you know, as in Adaptado's program, the phase 1, we had, you know, as I mentioned, 40 different executing entities. That means a lot of different reporting at different levels and perhaps also in different forms. And so it was a very important issue on working a lot to making sure that there are opportunities. There's a balance between having the reports in such a standardized way that you can aggregate, but also that you don't lose the relevance and the importance of the specific things from that project. So it's a balance, because you want to learn specific things about that project and learn and be able to innovate from that and grow from that. But then you also need it in a way, the information that needs to be aggregated among all of the different projects and all of that, and aggregated in a way so we can have good traceability from that local context to the SDGs, to the national level, but also to what we report to the Adaptation Fund, but more specifically also with other executing entities. So making sure that they understand how they are a relevant part of a whole puzzle. And when I say also good traceability to local contacts and relevance, is also what I mean is that we don't lose that balance on making, given it's not just numbers. Of course, numbers are relevant, but sometimes specific things that numbers can be low, but there's a lot of relevance on that adaptation story that has a potential for innovation and scaling up. So it's a balance on having that. So a lot of standardization, but without losing the opportunity to bring specific things and local things into that aggregation and consolidation of the information. And that is in indicators, beneficiaries, lessons learned, knowledge, in many other ways. So number 4, it's also about the reporting from the executing entities. As I mentioned, the relevance on having a good way of standardizing reporting, but also being able to have more information on that and the follow-up. Of course, that is also a challenge, because it's not just following up 1 or 2 or 3 projects, it's many projects. So that it's also a challenge from the NIE, but make sure that you as NIE dedicate the resources and efforts to do the follow-up, because that is to have a close relation and to be close from the executing entities is definitely very important. Number 5 is knowledge management and opportunity for cross-learning. I mentioned it before a little bit, but it's very relevant, and that it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity that we are also cross-learning from the different perspectives from the communities and from the different actors, but also from the different executing entities within their specific capacities as well. So that is also a challenge, but again, an opportunity. Number 6 is communication support from NIEs, because locally led adaptation normally implies that executing entities are smaller and more rural or more into the local context. Perhaps they will have less capacity on communicating what they're doing. And so we've found that it was very relevant as NIE to incorporate a lot more support on communicating the results of the different projects and giving them support on to turn that into knowledge products and documents and other videos. And we even had an expo, so they were, they could share them themselves, and all of that is support from the NIE. Another challenge, a very relevant challenge that we've had over the years, is staff rotation. In a small organization, small NGO, there is more probability that there will be staff rotation. It's not only on executing entities, of course, in NIEs and at different levels, but that is a continuous challenge that we have been working with. And number 8, it's more the opportunity, and I know that it has been mentioned, but I want to really stress out the opportunity for that locally led adaptation gives for sustainability beyond the project and the scalability that gives, and that is definitely something that it's worth the challenges, worth to tackle the challenges. This is what I wanted to share in terms of challenges and opportunities on monitoring specifically, but I would be very happy to, in case there is at the end questions or whatever, or consider that opportunities for explain something better. But thank you very much for letting us, giving us the opportunity to be here at the Gobeshona conference, which is definitely, as Miko said, an effort very relevant. Thank you very much, Adaptation Fund.
Thank you, Marianela. It was very interesting presentation. Thank you. Brief, interesting, straight to the points, and very insightful in a way, especially hearing about the challenges that you listed, and it's about coordination, it's about resources, multi-level coordination, and also capacity building. And I see that we're having lots of few questions in the chat box, and my colleagues Martina and Justice are going to respond them in the chat box, but also at the end. And please do post your questions for Marianela as well. We will address them in the Q&A section. Up next, we have another national implementing entity from Indonesia, from Kemitran Executive Director, Laude Suarif. Laude, if you're ready, over to you. Please present yourself briefly and start sharing your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Miko and Martina and Christina, and of course, Marianela, and who else? Justice from the Secretariat. Today, I'm going to share some challenges that actually have in Indonesia, monitoring challenges in Indonesia that are experienced by us. And I think it is important to share it with others because I think we can actually learn from failures and success that of our project implementations. In today's presentation, I just focusing my presentation on 2 projects that we actually implementing. The first one, indigenous people of Amatoa Kajang customary area in Bulukumba, and the second, better community adaptation for forest food-based management in Sadang watershed. If you look at the location of the project, at the moment we have about, I think, almost 10 projects now on Adaptation Fund. Thank you for the trust and the support from the Secretariat. But these 2 projects actually located in the island of Sulawesi, or the Celebes Islands in South Sulawesi in Indonesia. It is about 2-hour flight from Jakarta. The overall main objective of the first project, it is to enhance climate resilience and build capacity, adaptive capacity toward climate change for vulnerable communities through sustainable integrated watershed governance in indigenous people of Amatoa Kajang customary area in Bulukumba in South Sulawesi province. This is actually pose a big challenges because the Amatoa Kajang, it is actually very traditional. They do not interact with community outside their community. They are very close. So, for example, not everybody can actually go into their community. You need a special permit or special permission from the elders of the community, and they still practicing their very traditional way of life. Therefore, it is challenging if we want, for example, to introduce a new governance and how to govern their community, because now they're experiencing the impact of climate change. For example, in the past, they are never experienced actually a flood, but now their river actually flooded their home. It is not their fault because in the upstream and downstream of the rivers that actually be damaged by modern people. And now actually they need to adjust and to adapt their way of life. And of course, they have to change the governance within the water sector itself. And of course, it is very difficult for them to communicate with the governments, the academia, and even local government. So they need some kind of what you call it, local actors to convey their message. So this is actually the challenge that if we work with a local community. The intended outcome of this particular project is actually to reduce climate change vulnerability and risk by improving management and governance of watershed, and how they are going. So meaning that the upper stream of the waters, they have actually to look after to plant mangrove, to introduce what you call it agroforestry, so that they river as the main source of waters and their agriculture actually maintain quite well. And the second, actually trying to enhance the resilience of people, of indigenous people, but at the same time also still actually preserving their what you call it customary way of living. And another one, it is try to advance sustainable integrated watershed governance and adaptive to climate change. And of course, the last one, it is raising awareness of increased knowledge of local people. Again, this is, it seems, if you look at a project document, it is actually common to find this. But if you actually work with very, what you call it, very special local community, this is quite challenging. For example, this is not the new innovations. However, for intensive rice planting system, actually it is common in some other part of the regency itself. But for them, for example, crossbreeding, top grinding technique of cacao, it is kind of new to them. And also, for example, because of the goat actually hate the water, so we need to elevate the goat pen, so that actually the what you call it, the goat can go up, so that their feet is actually not wet. This is very basic, but it is quite difficult how to talk to them, because they, even in this particular community, even their actually garments, it has to be like black. They don't like some other colors. So again, when you talk about like integrated watershed governance to them, it is very difficult. You have to give them some kind of like example instead of give them actually wording. This is so that's why it is also important, I think, for locally led adaptation, because they are the one who experience it and they are the one actually need to fix their own problem. For example, this is, if you look at the way actually they are wearing black, all of them. So they are, and they still actually using very traditional tools. They are not doing, using machinery. So even actually introducing innovation, it is actually creating challenges. For example, how to balance the introduction of innovative approach and preserving traditional wisdom of them. So again, it is, you need to have some kind of the, and lastly, not lastly, but I mean, another point, it is the most important one, actually winning their heart of indigenous people to accept a new technique and approach, because the environment actually changed. So you need to some kind of like talking to them, and once they actually believe, they put trust on you, so that it is actually easier. Again, this is a special note, as Kajang tribe are inhabited a particular area in the forest, and Kajang was divided into two subgroups, call it Mountain Konjo, and actually Konjo's coastal Konjo, or the inner part of Konjo. So in the outer part, they already have some kind of like very good relationship with modern people. But in the inner part, they still actually maintaining their particular way of life. Another one, another project that I want to share, it is community adaptation for forest food-based management in Sadang, our watershed project. This is actually normal people. I don't know how to say it. It is, modern kind of people. And the level of destruction, it is actually higher compared to those using still traditional. So the Sadang watershed achievement, actually, for example, we actually successfully in planting mangrove, try to repair some of the damages, and also on mangrove planting. Another one, it is actually rice farmer in Rekang Regency. It is much nicer now after we actually talk and how actually to adjust the way actually planting the rice. And this particular project has been visited by Adaptation Fund Secretariat, and yeah, it is one of like a flagship that I like. Of course, I like all of my project, but this one kind of like it is, we can actually see the result of the. However, actually the main challenges, it is actually how to engage youth group on climate change, how you can actually trying to influence them, and assistance to women group in developing small scale industry, and of course the last one, how you actually winning the heart of the government, whether actually is because usually they what do they call it? Okay, if you have money, just make this particular project, and they trying to avoid very complicated approach. This is actually the government usually they want it to be fast and using non-complicated approach, for example, which is actually a bit different from, of course, the way civil society and the way Adaptation Fund actually is trying to do. Some successes, for example, from this small industry of coffee, now actually, if you look at the packaging of the coffee, it is getting better. And now they can actually sell it to even in the city and in many cafes. And some of them actually, we actually bought them and we actually sell it in our cafe in Jakarta, for example. They also produce liquid palm sugars for coffee and for any other purposes, and several, but I do not have the pictures, and several others goods that actually produced by those local community. Monitoring challenges, I would say I agree entirely 100% with Marianela, but for this particular two projects, I think one of the main challenges is lack of ability or skill of local communities in financial and technical reporting. You cannot actually ask them, to have like very good financial reporting or technical reporting. This is very, very important to be understood by the secretariat on accredited entity like Kamitra. So meaning that we need to give them a lot of support. The second, in most cases, the government stakeholders are reluctant to follow Adaptation Fund or accredited entity reporting style and template because the government, they have their own template and style. And of course, if you ask them to follow the style of the rules of accredited entity, then usually they are, no, we are government. You follow us, we will not follow you. This kind of thing, it is needs some kind of, what you call it, take and give, understanding. So it is another important aspect of monitoring challenges. The last one, actually lack of documentation on some failures experiences in a project. Because they, including me, I was always focusing on the success of the project. However, it is important, very, very crucial to have a complete documentation of failures, of errors that we made, because based on that, then we can actually learn. What you call it? The learning can come from like the success of the project, but also the failures of the project or challenges of the project. So this actually also need to be, I think it is important in the futures. We don't need to be very shy. If we, for example, we are actually fail in 1 or 2, 3 attempts, for example, I think it is important to be documented because it will actually give us a lesson learned. And the way forward, I think it is very important for us if we have actually support from the government. It is always very, very important to have a support from the main stakeholders like government, especially if you are actually looking to change the regulations or to introduce new policy. It is very, very important for the buy-in from the government. And again, if you are supported, for example, in district level, it is not necessarily actually you'll be supported by the provincial government. So it is important also for us to get a support from the lowest up to the highest level of the government. And of course, improve market access of forest product. For example, if you are successfully in introducing agricultures, and you can actually produce agroforestry, for example, then you have to find a way to increase their market access. Because if they can produce good stuff, but they cannot actually sell it, it is very difficult. And sometimes this part, it is actually the most difficult one. And for example, in this particular project, I think the improved technology, it is not high technology, but it is actually a very simple technology for coffee farmers in Toraja and Tanah Toraja. They are actually quite successful in the roasting, in the way they pick their coffee. So we give them like a good example for them to follow. So I think that's all that I can actually share. That last point, locally led adaptation, it is very, very important because it is actually trying to address the needs of the local people. And I thank you all.
Thank you, Laude. Thank you very much for your presentation and for touching upon your excellent, impressive efforts to reaching out to most vulnerable communities, including indigenous people, and ensuring that the traditional knowledge remains within the community, but also emphasizing the lessons learned from failures. I think that is a point that it's always, people are reluctant to talk about it, but indeed we learned a lot from our failures in projects. Thank you. Please put in any questions you might have for Laude as we move next with Jaciel Murphy, who is Standards Officer at the Ministry of Agriculture, Land, Housing and the Environment in Antigua Barbuda, and it's one of the national implementing entities of the Adaptation Fund. Jaciel, are you still here with us? Yeah. Please be prepared also to share your presentation and briefly introduce yourself. Thank you.
Okay. I am bringing up my presentation. In the meantime, I'll introduce myself. So I am Jaciel Murphy. I work at the Department of Environment, the accredited entity to the Adaptation Fund. I work closely with the director across several different projects. So I will be going through just two of our projects that we have implemented through the Adaptation Fund today. Just trying to make sure my screen is up 1 second.
Yes, we can see it very well. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so the first project I'll be going through is our AF McKinnon's project. So the official title of the project is An Integrated Approach to Physical Adaptation and Community Resilience in Antigua and Barbuda's Northwest McKinnon's watershed. The intention of that project was to reduce the vulnerability of the community by increasing the ability of the watershed to handle climate change, basically. What we have seen is that in recent years, we have extended periods of drought and then sudden impacts of heavy rainfall. So like just late last year, actually, we had several inches of rainfall fall within a day, which is uncommon for Antigua and Barbuda. An additional part of the project was to ensure the community as a whole will be able to withstand projected climate change impacts while the ecosystem can withstand the increased rainfall. So just to give you an idea, so the project is in the northwest area of Antigua and Barbuda. Right where you see the red marking is just the waterway itself. And this is just zoomed in. So as you can see, it goes through several different communities, this particular waterway, including the Gambles community, the Yorks community, the Fort Road community. Those are some of the main communities that it goes through. throughout all three communities is a pretty wide range of income levels, socioeconomic status. We have people on the lower end as well as people on the higher end. But what we have found, I'll go through this in more detail when we discuss the challenges. Lower income people tend to build right along the waterway. The land is usually a lot cheaper close to the waterway. So they're the first impacted when we have heavy flooding throughout all three of these communities. So here are the different components of the project. So it was the component one was to upgrade urban drainage and waterways to meet projected climate change impacts. Component two, revolving loans for homes in McKinnon's watershed to meet new adaptation guidelines established in the building code. And component three was adaptation, mainstreaming, and capacity building in NGOs and community groups to sustain project interventions. So these are some of the key project activities and outputs. We had engineering designs of the actual waterway. So we brought in an engineer so locally, we don't fully have the capacity to really engineer some of these solutions. So we have to usually outsource it to some of the other countries. So this particular engineer actually came in from one of the neighboring islands to review the entire waterway and actually develop the solutions and how exactly to address the issue of flooding throughout the entire waterway. We also did some vector control activities, usually around our rainy season. So our rainy season stretches from June to November every year. And we see increases in a lot of mosquito-borne diseases, particularly dengue. We don't have, malaria is not endemic to Antigua, but we do have dengue. We have had chikungunya in the past, and we have had Zika in the past. So usually we step up a lot of vector-borne, vector control activities around our rainy season. We also worked with several residents in the community, several landscaping and waterway maintenance companies within the actual community to maintain the waterway. What we found in the past is we usually have an intervention, we implement it during the life cycle of the project, and then after the project is over, nobody really maintains it. And then we end up back at square one. So what we have actually done differently this time is we've worked with the community to have actual community ownership so that the waterway is continuously maintained. Monthly, the grass is cut, the vegetation is kept low, the waterway itself is cleaned out. And we also have heavy duty equipment that would go in right before the hurricane season to clear the waterway as well. In addition to that, we also had loans to homeowners in the community. I think I have the figure somewhere here, but I think it's about 40% of the homes in the community to make their homes more climate resilient. That includes the putting on hurricane shutters. So one of our biggest impacts here in Antigua and Barbuda is that we're right in the middle of the hurricane belt. So nearly every year we get hit by hurricanes. Some are, thankfully for the past few years, we haven't had anything major. But of course, there's always that, you never know which year is going to be our year. Back in 2017, we had Irma, which completely flattened the second half of Antigua, that's Barbuda. So we had to evacuate everybody who was on that island. So with every project that we do, we try to make sure that we work with the communities to make them more climate resilient, especially when it comes to hurricanes. So hurricane shutters, making your roof stronger, able to withstand a hurricane. We're currently working on updating our building code. So in the past, our building code had homes built here in Antigua and Barbuda able to withstand a Category 3 hurricane. What we found is that that is not at all adequate. So we're actually currently updating our building code to ensure homes are able to withstand a Category 5 hurricane. Then we also had grants to community-based organizations to construct hurricane shelters, make them more climate resilient, including the putting in renewable energy, putting in hurricane shutters, changing doors, changing windows, reinforcing the roof, different things like that, as well as building hurricane shelters attached. So 5 of these organizations are churches that we've been working very closely with to build hurricane shelters for the community to be able to serve the communities that they are in. The 6 community-based organization that we've been working with is our recycling company. We generate a considerable amount of waste, especially plastic waste. So we are actually working with the recycling company now to help them expand their facilities and ability to, because they have equipment, but the challenge that they have is the buildings, the actual infrastructure to house this equipment, to manage a lot of the waste. So we've been working very closely with the recycling company here to facilitate that. Regarding challenges for this particular project, just like everybody else, we've had challenges with reporting from the executing entities. To actually execute the project and do a lot of the road works and build culverts and so on, we have had to work very closely with our public works department, which is another government agency. And one of the challenges that we have had is differences in priority. Their priority is maybe a different area of Antigua and Barbuda, whereas our priority is trying to get these project activities closed off. So that has definitely been a challenge. We've had to work with some private entities to actually construct some of the culverts, which of course, working with a private entity increases costs versus working with the government. So that has been a challenge. We've so far managed to get past it. The project is slated to close later this year, within the next 8 months. Another major challenge that we've had, I mentioned earlier about people building too close to the waterway. So the current laws in Antigua and Barbuda require a 15-foot setback from the waterways. But what we've been finding is people are building right up to the waterway, within 10 feet, within 5 feet of the waterway. So now, because we've widened the waterway, that has had some impact on a few homes. So that is a challenge that we're trying to overcome. We of course we have to implement interventions to address any issues that they run into. Another major problem that we've had is, of course, the impact of COVID-19. I know it's been several years since the actual pandemic, but we are still dealing with the consequences of it. As a small island where Antigua itself is only 108 square miles, we're a tiny island in the Caribbean, and COVID-19 has had a major impact on the supply chain particularly. So one of the reasons we've had to request 2 no-cost extensions so far for the project, because the grantees have been unable to complete their activities. And that has just been as a result of the supply chain. Trying to purchase solar panels, import them into Antigua, the batteries, everything. It has been a real challenge actually getting things. You can't buy them locally. Everything we have to import. So that has impacted us tremendously, as well as the increased cost. So especially with construction has gone up maybe 3, 4, 5 times versus pre-pandemic, which is when this project originally started. So that has definitely been a challenge, where we see increasing costs of everything, and we have the same amount of funds to try to complete the project activities. I will go on to the next project. So the next project is just it's a small grant. It's an AF innovation project. The official title of the project is Innovative Technologies for Improved Water Availability to Increase Food Security in Antigua and Barbuda. Antigua is a drought-stressed country. I don't remember off the top of my head the figure for our annual rainfall, but we go through drought very often. I think Antigua was in a drought from 2013 to about just last year, I think was when we finally came out of the drought officially. So farmers are, there's an issue with farming. The water quality standards that the reverse osmosis plant. So pre-drought, about 80% of our water was provided from surface water. Since the drought, I think 99% of our water is provided through reverse osmosis. That is a challenge with the farmers. Usually they complain about the water being too salty, too much chlorine in the water, because of course the water that is generated is intended for household use, not so much for farming. So we wanted to look at technologies to address that water challenge issue here in Antigua and Barbuda. So it's a pilot project. It's the very small scale project. So the two main objectives of the project was to demonstrate the application of two different innovative technologies for water provision in the agriculture sector, and to assess and develop policy standards to promote further update of innovative technologies to increase water availability for agriculture. The two components was the installation of innovative technology, and then the second component was the scope and study of technology currently used in the agriculture sector and assess the applicability of new adaptive technologies. These are the key project outputs. So we wanted to install a renewable energy powered reverse osmosis unit at a test site, which would increase the availability of fresh water. And then we had workshops with key stakeholders to demonstrate the technology, especially with farmers and different people working in the actual communities. We had a call for proposal for students and farmers for innovative technology. So this project is still ongoing. So this activity hasn't been completed yet, but what we're doing is actually working with the local community to have them come up with solutions. So we have sent out a call for a proposal for people to apply, farmers, students, to actually apply to demonstrate a new technology which might address the water shortage issues. And out of those people who apply, some will be selected, given a small grant to actually test it on a small scale, to then see if it can be scaled up to address the issue in Antigua and Barbuda. And then we wanted to explore mechanisms to make technologies widely available in Antigua and Barbuda to address water shortage issues. We are primarily looking at our SURF fund to perhaps buy the technology and then over time have the farmers pay back for the technology. So the challenges with that project is, of course, identifying the most suitable technology as address stress.
Can I kindly interrupt? Just, I'm mindful of time. Can you please, before you move to challenges, can you try to be brief? Because I want to be able to answer the questions we're getting as well. Thank you.
No problem. I think this is my last slide, so
Okay,
I'm going to wrap up right now.
you.
Okay, so the three main challenges, as I mentioned earlier, the impact of COVID-19 and actually the impact on the supply chain, impact on just, it has really slowed everything down, and impact on the increase in costs and so on. There is an issue with project scale up at this time. We're seeing how to address that challenge, because the original project was designed to pull water from the groundwater. But speaking with the experts here, the utilities company, we are mindful of the impact of salt intrusion. We don't want to affect the aquifers throughout the island. So that is something that we're looking at as that is a challenge that we're trying to figure out right now. We're brainstorming right now on how to address that challenge. So I will wrap up here in the interest of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jaisal, for your understanding, and thank you for sharing the important work that you're doing with your community and building the climate resilience of local communities, especially in response to hurricanes that you get on yearly basis. And I'm looking at the clock and I'm conscious about the time. And thank you to all our national implementing entities for sharing your great work that you're doing and challenges as well. I'm looking at the chat and we got a few questions that Justice, Marianella, and Martina already responded. We have one that I would like to take. It's from Milena. Hi, Milena. Thank you for your question. And it's about the role of NIEs in the context of promotion of LLA. What can we do besides accessing EDA, enhanced direct access, and bringing funds directly to communities? Justice, Martina, who wants to take this question from our team, or if NIEs have any insights as well, you're welcome to jump in.
Catherine, I'll give a quick bite at it, and colleagues can also join in. Indeed, NIEs have a major role to play beyond just assessing funding. Basically, we understand that at the local level, there are marriage of climate change related problems, and we need to build priorities. So what NIE does is basically to be able to provide capacity building to local communities, to be able to identify the key risks that they are facing and how to prioritize these risks. And basically also, building a robust understanding of climate change risks and uncertainties that inform adaptation decision, using indigenous knowledge, gathering data, keeping this data, assessing this data, and making good, use of this data. So NIEs have a major role to play beyond just assessing, funding from the Adaptation Fund, developing, monitoring and evaluation system, involving local communities in the implementation of the projects and also evaluating the projects. So the entire value chain of project development to project implementation, NIEs have a strong role to play in terms of, working with local communities. Over.
Thank you, Justice, for your prompt response. We had another question that Martina responded to Dr. Juyen. We also had a couple of questions from Vincent, and I see that he has posted another one for the CBA conference in Arusha. And let me respond that yes, the AF team will be present at CBA conference in Tanzania in May with the session. So looking forward to engaging with all of you who will be there. Martina, do we have any other question that I'm not seeing?
See any, Catherine.
Okay, and I see that also Marianella responded to Vincent. Marianella, do you have anything to add with regards to the question that Vincent asked you?
Well, I just want to totally agree on, first I didn't understand what he meant by extractive monitoring, but when he explained, definitely I think that the monitoring needs to be designed in such a way that it's value added for different levels. It's not just for one objective. It's, I mean, the monitoring, we have to put it in a way and design it in a way that it really helps the same communities or the same organizations to see, okay, where are their new opportunities for improving, or how do we identify opportunities for spin-offs or innovation or something like that. So I totally agree, and I appreciate the question because I think it's a very relevant issue that he mentions. So just wanted to say that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And these were, I think, all the questions, and we covered them. And we have 3 minutes to close. And we heard a lot about challenges that you presented, but I would like, I mean, implementing an LLA project doesn't come without challenges. We all know that, but I would like to hear from, all of you 1 to 2 sentences on opportunities, because I want to close on more on forward-looking the session. So I want to hear from Laude, Marianella, and Jaisal about mentioning 2 opportunities or enabling factors working with locally led initiatives. Laude, do you want to go first?
Yes, thank you very much. I think based on our limited experiences in implementing adaptation fund project, there are a lot of opportunities. For example, they even actually, some government even actually a little bit angry with us because they say it because why you are focusing your project on this particular province? Why not us, for example? This is actually the need of the people to have an adaptation project. It is very, very actually high, is the opportunity. The second, the level of support from local community also are very, very high. And hopefully some good project, it is also created interest to the, have a positive impact to the neighboring project. So I think that's the opportunity and hopefully we can actually fulfill their actually wish if we have an opportunity to have a project in their area.
Thank you. Marianela.
Yes, I totally agree with Laude. I want to add perhaps a very interesting opportunity on peer-to-peer learning and cross learning from different communities, because normally when a community or an organization sees something that has been done by another organization, another community, but it's different, but it kind of relates to their challenges, then it's bigger opportunity for them to be heavily involved. So on that cross learning and that scaling definitely generates results. So I would say that. And I also, we've seen, and yes, we talk about a lot of the challenges, and I totally agree with Jasia and Laude, but we also have seen the opportunity that brings on the empowering of the community or the organization to keep on. So they just kind of absorb it. Now we have let me talk about a chamber of farmers that chamber of farmers. Sorry. Now for them, adaptation is a must. It's not just a project; it's a must, because now it's part of their normal way. So that happens. So that involvement and empowering, it happens when you actually bring locally led adaptation into action.
Thank you. Jaisal, do you want to add anything before we close? And we are right on time, but since we started 5 minutes late, so I'm gonna just take another minute.
I will be as brief as possible. What we have seen is that definitely there has been a shift over time where we're actually getting a lot more public support in terms of not just the locals, but even the government as well is actually getting behind us a lot, and they're actually encouraging us to apply for more projects to try to address a lot of the similar issues throughout different areas of the island. So there has definitely been a lot more buy-in, a lot more people are getting on board.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And with this, we close today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us. And if you want to keep...
may I ask, before you close the session, may I ask everyone to turn on their camera so that we can take a picture for all the panelists?
Thank you. Thank you to all the attendees. And if you want to keep to be updated with the work that AF does, please check our website, follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and until the next Adaptation Fund session. Thank you all. It was a great pleasure having you all here.
Thank you, Catherine. That's very good moderation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks to you
Christina,
guys.
Martina. See you all.
See you.
Bye.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay, we're done. Thank you.